Okay. No, Baruch Hashem, that makes a lot of sense because obviously the last thing you want is to be stuck in the middle of the road when Shabbos starts. Okay. So it'll be great. What did they say? They say everybody must go to Meron and Lag BaOmer once in their life, but maybe not more than that. But it's something to do. It's a very, very amazing show. So I'm going to talk about it a little bit, maybe it's a natural fit as an introduction to your trip. When I was younger, I used to also take the trip with the guys, and I would talk there. So this is what I'll talk here, and the like. So Lag BaOmer obviously is a special day. It's a hiatus in the morning of Svira, the not getting haircuts, making weddings. According to some minhagim, Lag BaOmer is actually the end of it, meaning even after Lag BaOmer you can continue to get married. According to other minhagim, Lag BaOmer is a break, but after Lag BaOmer, the Avelis continues. But l'chulei alma, Lag BaOmer is a unique day. We don't say Tachanun. We didn't say Tachanun. Tomorrow we're not going to say Tachanun. Even at Mincha we're not going to say Tachanun today. So the question is, like, what is so special about Lag BaOmer? What happened on Lag BaOmer? What is the reason why it's I won't call it a Yom Tov because you can do Malacha, but it's a quasi Yom Tov and the like. So it's interesting, there are two different reasons why Lag BaOmer is a celebration, and they almost celebrate opposite things. We know that during the period of the Omer, between Pesach and Shavuos, the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva died, and that was a very, very great tragedy. And Chazal give us the reason. I mean, they died because of a plague, but what is the spiritual reason why they died? So the Gemara in Yevamos says, because they did not show proper kavod, they did not show proper respect and honor to each other, and God took them away. So first of all, it's an interesting point. What does it mean they didn't show proper honor? I mean, these are the students of Rabbi Akiva. These are not high school kids. Rabbi Akiva himself taught, "V'ahavta l'recha kamocha," loving your friend as yourself is the greatest mitzvah of the Torah. So these are gedolim, and these are the students of Rabbi Akiva. How could it be that they didn't show proper kavod? Zelazeh. And also, is that a capital crime? I mean, that'd be kind of scary. In other words, are you telling me if I don't show proper kavod, I die, God takes me away? That seems a pretty strict punishment. And the third question is, 24,000 students is certainly a big, big tragedy. It is a tragedy. But to be frank, we've had worse. We had the Holocaust, 6 million Jews. So every single year, we have to commemorate over and over again the students of Rabbi Akiva. It was a tragedy, but we've had worse tragedies. Why is this Rabbi Akiva tragedy come to the fore over and over and over again every single year? So to really understand what's going on, I want to be, again, and we'll segue to how this is connected to Lag BaOmer. To really understand what's going on, we need to focus on an observation of Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, who says the word kavod, honor, respect, has the same shoresh as kaved, which means heavy, weighty. Now we know that heavy or weighty can actually be synonyms in English for significant and important. Like you might say, this person is a real heavyweight in his field. It's not just referring to boxing. You might call a big expert in medicine or science. He's a heavyweight, etc. So Rav Hirsch says, showing somebody kavod doesn't mean you're polite to them, you're nice to them. You could be nice to somebody, but you consider them you're inferior. They're inferior. Like, I'm nice to you, like I would be nice to a dog, to have something in that nature. Kavod, Rav Hirsch says, is not about politeness, and it's not about etiquette. It's about seeing the worthiness in the other person, seeing their heaviness, meaning seeing their significance, seeing their chashivos. If we would have had a video of the students of Rabbi Akiva, we might not have seen anything wrong. They were polite. They behaved with derech eretz. They followed all the halachos. But attitudinally, they didn't really think that the other people had much to teach them. Now, why was that so? Perhaps because they had such a great teacher, Rabbi Akiva, that they didn't think they could learn from each other. They all connected to the great Rebbe, etc. It's still going to be somewhat of a mystery, but the point Rav Hirsch is making is, don't make the mistake that the students of Rabbi Akiva were guilty of violations of basic derech eretz. Our assumption is they were not guilty of those types of violations, but it was a much more subtle idea of attitude, that in order to have kavod for another person, you have to see them as worthy, see them as important, see them as worthwhile. Be open to learn from them and not just impose your Torah on them. So that's the idea of not having kavod. Now, I did raise the question, do you get the death penalty for that? Right? So the answer is you don't get punished for that, but here's the point. The 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva, their destiny were to be the Torah leaders of the next generation. That's what should have happened. And the idea is you can't be a transmitter of Torah unless you see the worthiness and significance of the people that you're teaching. And therefore, God took them away not as a punishment, but God simply said they cannot be the transmitters of Torah. You know, sometimes, this is a problem in the Kiruv world sometimes. Now again, Baruch Hashem, not in Ohr Somayach, and I'm going to give you a caricature. I don't even think there's anyone that ever actually talked this way, but who knows. Sometimes there's this idea where somebody might tell a person who's not religious, he says, you know, your life is totally worthless, and you're just a bag of garbage, but I will give you my wisdom and my knowledge so that your miserable life will have some significance in the world. Again, I've never met someone who actually talked that way, but sometimes there's a certain attitude of condescension, a certain attitude of patronizing, as if there's nothing you have that's worthwhile. I'm not talking to anyone individually here, but I'm going to lift you up. That doesn't work. Number one, it's not true. And number two, it doesn't work practically, because when people feel they're being spoken with condescension, they're going to resent it, they're going to walk away. So that's the idea. You want to be a teacher of Torah. You want to be an exemplar of Torah. You have to see the other with respect, see their chashivos, see the radiance within their neshama, see their goodness. Understand that just as you might be able to teach them, they might be able to teach you. Indeed, Chazal tell us. One great rabbi said, I have learned much from my teachers, and even more from my colleagues, and most of all, from my students, right? And that's the idea of kavod, seeing, right? Okay. Now, yeah.
So you're telling me that out of 24,000 Gedolim, how is there not one that didn't die from kavod?
Yeah, in other words, how could it be 100% fatality rate? It's really hard to understand. Now, one possibility is that maybe he actually had more than 24,000, and 24,000 died. So, maybe we're not dealing with 100%, but I don't know. The mashmos of the Gemara is 100%. By the way, there's a second part of the story that people don't pay attention to that's very worthy of note. Rabbi Akiva, remember, had struggled for 24 years to learn Torah. The word number 24 for some reason is prominent here. And he started with the first graders, 24 years. And in those 24 years, he was separated from his wife. And she lived in poverty and suffering. And finally, he comes back with 24,000 students. So imagine how she feels. Now she sees all the suffering was worth it. And a short while later, everything collapses. You know that she died. Rachel is his wife's name. She died shortly after the students died. Is it so unlikely that she died of heartbreak? But what did Rabbi Akiva do? He gathered together 5 students, and he started again. One of those 5 was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And the whole Mishnah, and eventually the Gemara, came from the Torah he taught to those 5 students. Now, we often don't focus on that part of the lesson. But how would a person feel? You worked so many years and you accomplished so many things, and it all gets taken away from you. Are you going to start again? Are you going to say, all right, I'll do 5? 5 and 24,000 are not really comparable numbers. And yet Rabbi Akiva didn't give up. Rabbi Akiva said, even if everything gets destroyed, I'm going to start again. That's the tremendous lesson for the Jewish people, to consider the Holocaust, where people lost. Well, number one, the yeshivas were wiped out, the Gedolim were wiped out. People individually lost their families, lost their brothers and sisters, their parents, their own spouses, their own wives and children. And yet they said, we're going to start again. That's a tremendous, tremendous lesson. Don't give up. And you never know that maybe the second time around there'll be a bigger blessing than even the first time around. There was a great Rosh Yeshiva who came to the U.S. from Europe before World War II. Rav Shlomo Hyman became the Rosh Yeshiva of Torah V'das. And he was a Talmud of Rav Baruch Ber Levovich, who was one of the great, great Rosh Yeshivas in Europe. And when Rav Shlomo Hyman came to America, there were very few yeshivas, number one, and the yeshivas didn't have big enrollments. So he had been a big Rosh Yeshiva in Europe, lecturing to hundreds of students. He was giving a shiur to 5 people. And he was very animated, excited, gesticulating. So one of his friends saw him getting real excited, talking to 5 people. He said to him, listen, I understand in Europe you were talking to 500 people, so got really excited. You're talking to 5 people. What are you getting so excited? So he said, I'm not talking to 5 people. These 5 people are going to get married. They're going to have families, children, grandchildren. Some of them are going to become teachers of Torah. We're going to have students. I'm not talking to 5 people. I'm talking to the thousands of people that are going to emerge from these 5 people. I'm not teaching a shiur a particular day in a particular place. I see, when I look at these 5, I see a future that will come out. And this must have been what Rabbi Akiva saw as well. He had 24,000. He lost them all. He only had 5. But out of those 5 came the Torah Shebaal Peh, meaning most of the Mishnah. If you enumerate the Tanoim in the Mishnah, you will see there the students or the students of the students of those 5 Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva. So that's a part of the story that's very beautiful and very powerful. We often don't pay attention to that part of the story. Now, let me just answer the last question I raised, then I'm going to connect it to Lag BaOmer. And that is, why do we have to commemorate this every single year if we don't even have an official Holocaust commemoration for 6 million Jews? And I think the answer is actually a fairly pashut answer. If the issue of Avelus, mourning, would just be mourning, then yeah, we should do the 6 million, not the 24,000. But the difference between the Holocaust and Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim is we cannot give a definitive reason for the Holocaust. We can speculate, we can talk about it, but we don't know what we're supposed to fix. It's kind of, we don't really know. We think, we imagine. So as a result, when we contemplate the Shoah, we're not really sure what it is we're supposed to do about it. When it comes to the students of Rabbi Akiva, we are given a definitive reason, an authoritative reason, a reason that Chazal gave us. They didn't show kavod, zeh lazeh. Now, that gives me something to work on. So why do I remember the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva? Not to mourn and not to grieve and not to just cry about them, but to rectify the reason that caused their death. I have a concrete assignment, meaning when I contemplate the Holocaust, I don't necessarily know what my assignment is. When I contemplate the death of Rabbi Akiva, Talmidim, I know what my assignment is, to be mitaken, to rectify the loy nagu kavod zeh lezeh. And it's no accident that it's during this period between Pesach and Shavuos, because we are preparing to receive the Torah. And in order to receive the Torah, we have to be in a state of unity, ish echad, uvalev echad, one body, one soul. And therefore, it's bedafka during this period of time that we have to engage in being unified, in caring about each other, in respecting each other, in honoring each other, in seeing the good that is in each other. That's not a contradiction. See, although the Omer period intrinsically is actually a joyous time, this period is not intrinsically sad. We are actually supposed to be celebrating receiving the Torah, but we then mix it with the mourning aspect. But it's not really a contradiction, because by rectifying the loy nagu kavod zeh lezeh, that is part and parcel of our preparation of Matan Torah. Okay. Now, Lag BaOmer, there's a tradition that the students of Rabbi Akiva stopped dying that day. And that is one reason for celebration. The plague stopped. So right, and that makes it a holiday kind of. The plague stopped. But I want to kind of give you a little bit of a Kabbalistic explanation. Why did the plague stop on the 33rd day of the Omer? So I'm not going to go into all of the idea of the Sfiros, but here I just want to point out that the 7 weeks of the Omer, we have 7 weeks of the Omer, they correspond to the 7 lower, right? There are 10 Sfiros. These are like energy centers through which God interacts with the universe. But the first 3 are called God's brains. They are really the concealed mental operations. Keser, the crown, which is will, Chachma, Bina. So that we're not talking about. The lower 7 are already behavioral and emotional manifestations. The lower 7. So what are the lower 7? Just to enumerate them: Chesed, loving kindness; Gevura, inner strength; Tiferes, beauty; Netzach, eternity or victory; Hod, glory; Yesod, foundation; Malchus, kingship. And there's a vast literature exactly what these different Sfiros mean, what types of spiritual energy is channeled. In some of them, Chesed, that's a relatively easy one to understand, but what exactly are the other ones? So each week of the Omer corresponds to one of those Sfiros. So for example, the first week of the Omer, which is the week of Pesach, at least 6 days of Pesach, is the week of Chesed, loving kindness. Then we move to Gevura. Now, what gets a little complicated is that just as there are 7 weeks, there are also 7 days in a week. So this is like a hologram or an infinite regression. Every Sfira contains every other Sfira. So every day of the Omer, if you use the Sfira vocabulary, is identified both as a day and within the week it's located. So for example, many Siddurim will even have this in small letters. The first day of the Omer, which is the second night of Pesach, is called Chesed Shebechesed, loving kindness within loving kindness, meaning the day of loving kindness within the week of loving kindness. The second day, not the third day of Pesach, but the second day of the Omer, is called inner strength within loving kindness. Gevura Shebechesed. Now, don't confuse the second day of the first week with the first day of the second week. The second day of the first week is called Gevura Shebechesed. The first day of the second week is called Chesed Shebigvura. right? And actually, there are Sfarim, both in English and Hebrew, that try to describe how in human behaviors I can bring this divine energy into the world, meaning it actually gives you an assignment for each day, like a 49-day calendar. The day of Chesed Shebegvura, you do this. The day of Tiferet Shebegvura, you do this. And that's a very good way of understanding what the Sfiros actually means in terms of human behavior. Okay, so that's the first thing to know. Every week of Sfira is Keneged one of those lower emanations. And since every Sfira contains all of the elements of the other, by the way, it keeps on going, infinite levels. There is, the chesed of the gvura of the, whatever it is, but we'll just take it down to one level. That within every week of a dominant Sfira, there'll be the other Sfiras. Okay. Now we also know that for each of the 7 Sfiras, there's a dominant human personality who represents the human manifestation of that spiritual koach. So Chesed is Keneged Avraham. Gevura is Keneged Yitzchak. Tiferet, beauty, which is actually the synthesis of Chesed and Gevura, is Yaakov. Eternity or victory is Moshe. Moshe is number 4, not Yosef. Number 4. Hod, glory, is Aaron. Yesod, foundation, number 6, is Yosef. And number 7, Malchus, kingship, is David HaMelech. Okay? And by the way, this is the same pattern for the Ushpizin on Sukkot. And it's also the pattern of the Hakafot on Simchas Torah. Once you get into Sfiros, you kind of see them everywhere. And Kabbalistically, this applies to many, many, many different aspects, yeah.
I'm curious, let's say in Hinduism you have chakras, I think, so is that related? Did it come from Judaism?
Well, it's hard to know what the origin is, but very, very possibly. There actually is a tradition. This is maybe you've heard it, but if you haven't, I think it'll surprise you. That, remember that after Sarah died, Avram took another wife called Keturah. Now, Chazal actually say it was Hagar that he took back, but it says Keturah. And it said he had a lot of children from Keturah. Avram didn't just have Yitzchak and Yishmael. From Keturah, he had seven sons. And it says he gave them gifts, and he sent them to the east. So there are some sources that indicate that the gifts he gave them were wisdom, which became the foundation of Eastern religions. And he sent them, and they went to China, to India, which means that although it's very true, of course, that things like Hinduism over the years degenerated into a kind of paganistic idolatry, but the core of wisdom may have come from Avraham Avinu. So, if you want to make a connection between the chakras and the Sfiros, I think that's entirely possible. So, not that they borrowed it from the Torah, but they developed it before we got the Torah, but they may have got it from Avraham Avinu, who was the original source of that wisdom. So that's an interesting connection. Okay, so now let's look at this. Lag BaOmer, tonight's Omer count. 33rd day of the Omer. Let's plot it in terms of the Sfiros. 4 weeks and 5 days, right? That's 33. Now, it's a little confusing. When we say 4 weeks and 5 days, we're actually in the 5th week. Even though, you said 4 weeks because you completed 4 weeks. You're in the 5th week. So it turns out that Lag BaOmer is the 5th day within the 5th week. In terms of Sfiros, the 5th Sfira is Hod, glory, which is Aaron, and the day is the 5th day, which is Aaron. So Lag BaOmer is Hod Sheba Hod. glory of glory, a double dose of Aaron, Aaron squared. Why is that important? And what is the midah of Hod? Again, we're not going to be able to go through all the spheres, but what is this midah of glory? So we know Pirkei Avos describes Aaron's midah as Ohev Shalom, V'rodev Shalom, the lover of peace, the pursuer of peace. He loved all of God's creations. By the way, that lashon even implies animals. He loved all that God created. Umakarven the Torah, and through his love, he brought people to Torah. He didn't bring them to Torah by rejecting them, by criticizing them, by pushing them around. He brought them to Torah by the love that he showed them. The midah of Hod is when you step back and you let the other person shine. It's the receptivity to the good that's in the other. This was the midah of Aaron. Unlike Netzach, Moshe Rabbeinu was Netzach. Now Netzach has a different role in the world. Netzach is victory. Netzach is, I gotta convince you to do the right thing. So Moshe Rabbeinu sometimes had to be very forceful, even though he was the most modest of all people, but Moshe had to give the orders. So Moshe's avoda, so to speak, was to make you do the right thing. Aaron's avoda was to step back and let you shine. So, Lag BaOmer is a double dose. The spiritual power of Lag BaOmer is a double dose of Aaron. The spiritual emanation of seeing the good in others, which, as our Hirsch says, is ultimately what kavod is. So now you understand what happened. For 32 days, and before that, the students of Rabbi Akiva didn't really look at the other and see anything special there. But comes the day of Lag BaOmer, Aaron, Hod Shebahod. The cataracts off their eyes get lifted. They see the radiance of the neshama. Now they can feel genuine kavod towards the other. If the plague came because they couldn't see the kavod in the other, the day that they were able to perceive that, the plague stops. According to some opinions, it stops permanently because it was a permanent change. Like the other opinion, it was short-lived and it resumed afterwards, but at least for that day, that one day, they saw true reality. Did you see, somebody sent me an article, interesting article, that apparently it has been determined scientifically that you could measure light emanating from a person, photons, which stops as soon as the person dies. Person dies, the light gets shut off. So what is that light? All right, so scientists have their theories of, but the neshama is light. The neshama leaves the body, you don't have that light anymore, right? But quite literally, there is a light that emanates from every person. Until Lag BaOmer, even the Talmidei Rabbi Akiva didn't see the light. Lag BaOmer, they saw the light. The Magefa went away. Okay, so that's Kabbalistically why Lag BaOmer had that special effect. Now, that is, I started off by saying there are two reasons why we celebrate Lag BaOmer. This is reason number one. It was the cessation of the deaths of the Talmidei Rabbi Akiva. There is reason number two, which is connected to your trip, and that is, it is said to be the day of death, much later, of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Now you may say, well, why are we celebrating the day of death? We would think that that's a sad day. Well, we have another tradition that on the day that he died, he revealed to his Talmidim the great mysteries, secrets of the Torah that are in the book of the Zohar. Zohar itself is a word that means radiant light.
The day he died, right?
The day he died. The day he died. And as a result, there is simcha because the greatness of his Torah permeated the world, b'dafka, as he was leaving the world. And therefore we celebrate. And since the tradition is he is buried in Meron, and Lag BaOmer is the yard site, so hence hundreds of thousands of people go to Meron. Now, again, there's a little bit of a story about this. Some say that, Lag BaOmer is actually not the best day to go to Meron because it's more of a carnival atmosphere. If you were to go to Meron today, well, maybe people are already there, but if you would go to Meron last month or a month from now, there would be, 25 people there. And you would have the whole kever to yourself. You could daven by the kever, for 5 hours, and it'd be, be wonderful, really full. Now, with Lag BaOmer, you're lucky if you get even close to it, and whatever it is. So that's always a machlokas, should I go on Lag BaOmer because that's the special day? Or should I go at a time when I can have more kavana and more connection to it? Every person makes their own decision, or maybe I'll go more than once, Lag BaOmer, and then I'll go some other time. It is worthwhile, actually, to go to Meron sometime when you don't have hundreds of thousands of people. And I want to point out that there is something special about Meron, because even the Brisker Rav, who was not a fan of going to kevers, meaning Brisk does not have this minhag of going to here and going there, unlike, let's say, Hasidim and Sfardim. But when he was ill, he asked Rav Shach to go to Meron to daven for him. So even to me, I don't know if you can get how impressive that is, but to me, if even the Brisker Rav said to daven in Meron, there must be something to it, because the Brisker Rav was not an aficionado of visiting graves and the like. So there is something very, very kadosh about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Now, let me tell you one Gemara about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and that is, every day we say in Kriya Shema that if you keep Hashem's mitzvos, He will reward you with prosperity, and you will gather your grain. So there's a fascinating machlokas between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Yishmael says, if the Torah says if you do the mitzvahs you'll gather your grain, from here we learn out a Jew is permitted to engage in making a living. Parnasa. It's okay. I don't say, how can you do parnasa, you're not learning? It's okay to have parnasa. Well, that sounds sensible. But there's somebody who argues with that. And the person who argues is none other than Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He says, Parnasa? What are you talking about? A guy is going to plow when it's time to plow, and plant when it's time to plant, and harvest when it's time to harvest, and thresh when it's time to thresh, and grind the grain. When is he going to learn? How can a person waste his time on this? So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says an extraordinary position. A person should leave it to God. The only thing you do with your time is Torah, mitzvos, tefillah. Hashem will take care of you. In other words, he's basically living a life without hishtadlus. Now the Gemara says, many people followed the path of Rabbi Yishmael, and they were blessed. And many people followed the path of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and they starved. So the Gemara is indicating that for most of us, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is not the pathway. We don't have the zechus that I can stay at home and learn, and Hashem will deliver all my parnasa to me. We have to have a plan. Even if you're in Kolel, you have to have some type of plan. So for most of us, the Gemara indicates we're not on that madrega. But the thing is, he was on that madrega because it actually worked for him. The Gemara tells us for 12 years he was hiding in a cave because the Romans wanted to kill him. And during those 12 years, fruit trees grew and water came and meat was brought to him by the birds. So his attitude basically was, it worked for me, why won't it work for you? The answer is, we're not on the Madrega. So when we try to connect to Rav Shimon Bar Yochai and Lag BaOmer, we're trying to connect to that Kedusha. We know it's like looking up at the stars. We know we'll never reach the stars. But I look up, so I'm somehow a little bit connected. We want to connect to that Kedusha. And that's what the hope would be when you go to Meron. To feel the Kedusha, connect to him. In fact, it would be very, very nice. I don't know, again, it's hard to structure it because it's an unstructured event so much. But if you could bring along, even in English, a book of some of the teachings of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai and learn some of his teachings, that would be a very beautiful and very appropriate way of linking to him in Meron. Now, here's the thing. So it turns out that Lag BaOmer has two different celebrations. It is the cessation of the deaths of Talmidei Rabbi Akiva, and it is the yahrzeit of the great Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who was one of the 5 students that Rabbi Akiva taught after the 24,000 died. So the last one I want to leave you with, I'm going to be quick on this, is that in some ways, these two celebrations are a little bit of a contradiction. Because here is the thing. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai represents passion, devotion, commitment, rejection of the world. Now, that's a wonderful thing, to be passionately connected to Torah. But it's often the case in our own lives that the more passionate we become about Ruchnius and Torah learning, the less we can accept and respect people who are not following that particular path, whether it be our parents or whatever it would be. And the other way around, the more open and tolerant and accepting we are, the less passionate we are about Torah. We allow our passion to take away from our tolerance, or we allow our tolerance to take away from our passion. Note that Lag BaOmer is calling on you to embrace both ideas. By remembering the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva, I see how important it is to honor and cherish and respect every Jew. And by focusing on Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, I see how important it is that I be passionately connected to recognize that Torah and mitzvahs are the only thing that really matters in this world. And I can't make it an either or binary type of choice. I can't allow my passion to take away my love and respect even for others. And I can't allow the love and respect I have to have for others to take away my passionate connection. So it is very interesting that Lag BaOmer joins these two ideas together, because a Jew has to have both of those ideas. We know that each and every one of us tends to gravitate towards one pole or the other pole. So you meet Jews who they love everybody, but they don't necessarily have a lot of standards. Then you have Jews who are zealous and righteous, but they may disparage. Again, I'm caricaturing. I don't mean to condemn people wholesale, but you often see this. And Lag BaOmer, as many other places in Judaism, says you got to combine both of those qualities. And then you create a place for Hashem in the world that ultimately will bring us to the Geula Shlema B'mheira. So wish you a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful trip. May you be inspired. May there be a hisorus in your neshama. And most importantly, may you come back. May you take from it something that you will continue to have the rest of the year, not just a one-day high. Every experience in Judaism is significant only to the degree there is a carryover. When there's no carryover, it just becomes, another experience in the bucket, my bucket list, as they say. So, Be'ezras Hashem, I hope it'll really be mashpia you in a very, very good way. So, take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you for listening to this Ohr Somayach production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.